Taking matters into his own hands, President Trump signing a number of executive orders on COVID-19 relief on Saturday. New coronavirus aid talks stalling in Congress, although further negotiations are possible. The president's orders offer expanded unemployment benefits, eviction protection, and a payroll tax holiday. Joining me now, former White House Chief of Staff, former Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, great to see you. Your thoughts on these executive orders and to what extent they could actually be implemented, particularly the payroll tax holiday and the extra $400 in unemployment benefits.
Yeah, Dagan, good morning, and thanks for having me. And looking at them over the weekend, it was fascinating to see how they structured these things, and it looks like a lot of it comes out of money that was already appropriated in the CARES Act and then run through the Department of Homeland Security, through the Stafford Act. That's a very powerful piece of legislation that Congress, when Congress passed many years ago, gave every administration a great deal of authority and a great deal of discretion. That's where the money's coming, for example, under the executive order for these extensions to the unemployment benefits. There's the CARES Act back in the springtime appropriated roughly $150 billion in that area to DHS. Less than half of it, less than half has already been spent. And what it looks like the president's tried to do is go in there and say, OK, I'll redirect this money that Congress has already appropriated. Looks like it could be fairly well backed up legally. I haven't had a chance to do the cross references and so forth, but it's the type of thing that the Office of Management and Budget used to work on all the time. So my guess is they've done their homework on this and can probably make most of it stick.
Well, here's the problem. You have to have Democratic governors get on board because that $400 weekly payment, which would replace the $600 in unemployment benefits, 25% has to be funded by the states. Even if the money is there left over from the CARES Act, of course, Governor Cuomo rejected the plan as just an impossibility. He said that over the weekend. So it's to what extent that governors step up and states step up to make these benefits happen. But then also on the payroll tax side, whether the companies out there across the land deduct that money or basically let that payroll tax holiday go into effect for the workers so they get the benefit.
Sure. We'll deal with the first one first, which is the governors. I saw what Governor Cuomo said. I guess that's fine. He's governor of his state. He has the right not to participate in this program. I think it would be very difficult for him to continue that if he turns out to be wrong. And you go to a state like South Carolina, where I am, and the governor's a Republican, decides to try and work with the federal government to get that extra supplement. And if it starts working in those states, it can be very difficult for those blue state governors to sort of stay on the sidelines. And face it, let's be candid with each other. There's certainly an amount of politics here that even surprises me, and I thought I was one of the least naive people in Washington, D.C., to not have any legislation before this August vacation started really surprised even me. I didn't realize that Mrs. Pelosi and Mr. Schumer were that dug in on refusing to negotiate. My gut is that the president tried to meet someplace in the middle, and that the Democrat leadership in the House and the Senate refused to compromise. That surprised even me. So the politics is still there, but I don't think the governors can hold out if other states are making it work.
I'll get to the business question in a minute, but why didn't the Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell, take up that $3.5 trillion bill that was passed by Nancy Pelosi in the House in late May? Why didn't the negotiations on getting something done, another stimulus done, start? Why wasn't that happening all of June and all of July?
Well, keep in mind, I think the way Washington has worked over the last couple of years, I've been there about 10 years, I guess, is that a lot of negotiation goes into legislation before the legislating starts. You sort of want to know where you're going before you start the legislation. And that's exactly what happened here. The House passed something. And listen, we used to do it when I was in the House, when the Republicans were in control of the House and Barack Obama was president. We'd send messaging documents, messaging legislation all the time that we knew had no chance of ever becoming law. And that's exactly what the Democrats did on that $3 trillion number. That's outrageous and unnecessary. And they knew it. Those were votes they took in order to satisfy their primary voters back in the spring. Fine. Again, we used to do the same thing. But that doesn't mean that there weren't discussions going on much earlier before the summertime over what might come next. Yes, you heard Mr. McConnell say back in the springtime, let's slow things down and take a look. I think that continues to be the right attitude because, again, more than half of the CARES money hasn't flowed out yet. That money we talked about to DHS is just one example of several. Of much of the money from the spring legislation hasn't left the government coffers yet. So slow was actually probably a pretty good strategy going into it. But again, I was surprised there wasn't more compromise by the Democrats at the end.
Well, everybody in Washington, including the Republicans, knew that $600 extra per week was going to expire at the end of July. And we don't have time to get into the debate about how many people just chose not to go back to work, even if they were recalled, because they were making more money at home on unemployment than in their jobs. Nevertheless, it does hurt many Americans who are relying on that extra money. So from this day forward, what do you think happens in terms of some sort of stimulus compromise? Do you think that that does happen and kind of trumps, no pun intended, the executive orders from over the weekend?
Yeah, Dagan, very quickly on the $600, keep in mind one of the things the Republicans, the White House, offered was a short-term extension to that to get us through August, and the Democrats wouldn't even talk about that. And again, I try not to be naive, but that surprised me because those are usually the types of deals that Washington gets done, especially in August. But going forward, what's the prospect for another stimulus? I don't know. I think it depends on how much of what happened on Saturday sinks in. If the unemployment supplement works, if the money for the rental assistance or the rental protection works, if the student loan forgiveness works, it sort of obviates another bill in the fall. So it should be very interesting to see where the political blame lies. When the Republicans were in charge of the House and major legislation didn't get passed, even though a Democrat was in the White House, the Republicans in the House got blamed. Now it seems like the Republicans are in charge of the White House, and they seem to be getting blamed for this, even though the Democrats control the House. So I think the media spin on this will have a lot to do with whether or not something gets done in the springtime.
Mick, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
we
Diane.
didn't even get into debt discussions because, again, that doesn't seem to matter to a whole lot of folks these days, but it will eventually. So, Mick, please come back.
There'll be plenty of need for it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Diane.
Good to see you.